Hello, everyone. Welcome to INSZN's College Football Show. I am Braxton Wilkes, joined as always with co-founder Christian Berry. This is our Week 12 edition. We're previewing all 7 games that we've kind of highlighted for Week 12. I know before we kind of get into that, the first game we're going to look at is USF Navy. But before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit and let Christian talk a little bit about some exciting news that INSZN has come out with over the past week and a half.
Yeah, absolutely. So last week we unveiled what we're calling in-season AI, which is our internal game prediction model that has around a 74-75% accuracy in picking the outcome or the winner of a particular matchup. This ranks among the highest, if not the highest, game prediction models on the market right now. If you're an in-season insider, you get access to all the games, all the different lines that we have for these matchups. So super excited about unveiling that. We also posted, just for continuity, the historical predictions that we had throughout the season. And so you can go back and look at how we would have predicted different games, different conferences, etc. But yeah, super excited about that. And we can go ahead and jump into the USF Navy game this weekend.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So, as you're pulling that up, USF Navy, the spread currently Vegas has Navy at plus 10.5. So USF winning that game, and then 64.5 is the over under, which for most people, you see Navy, you're thinking under. You're thinking Army Navy game. This is going to go under. You're thinking 32, 34 points total of a game. This is not your grandfather's Navy. This Navy is, a high-powered rush offense. So let's talk about that a little bit. Tell me kind of what you're seeing from the get-go.
Sure. So we'll go ahead and look at, since you brought up Navy's offense, we'll go ahead and look up what they've been able to produce this year. They're producing about 305 rush yards per game, only 134 passing yards per game. While USF is only allowing around 100 rush yards per game. So this is going to be definitely that matchup we see of the offense versus defense, kind of on both sides of the field. If we look at SP Plus rankings, Navy ranks 31 SP Plus offensive ranking, which I have to think is one of their highest that they've ever had, because they're usually a defensive first team, putting the ball on the ground, low scoring game, eating up a lot of clock. But this is a different Navy team, as you said, from previous years. If we look at USF, they're 16th in SP Plus offense and 60th in SP Plus defensive rankings. So again, this is going to be kind of the offense versus offense matchup and seeing what the defenses can even hold up against one another. I know that USF is going to score. They having the 16th best SP Plus offensive ranking this year, having Byron Brown as their quarterback. They've put up a lot of points this year. They've had some really good wins. Navy hasn't faced that tough of a competition, that tough of an opponent schedule this year, but still 7-2. If there's anything you want to look at in particular here, I'm happy to kind of take a little bit of a deeper look into it.
Yeah, no, I mean, one thing I wanted to point out initially was just that, Tuesday night, the college football playoff rankings came out. I guess the latest one. The committee had USF one in the top 25 at number 24, but also as the top G5, that group of five, or I guess with the Pac-12 group of six team that would be in the playoff, have that automatic bid.
Absolutely.
If they won the conference. It seems like the American is going to be the conference that gets that fifth champion in. But I wanted to just talk about, USF right now in the driver's seat. Obviously, it's going to come down to kind of big games like this coming down the stretch, and then really what it looks like a matchup against North Texas in the American Championship game.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I mean, if we look at their last 3 regular season games, Navy, that's a winnable game. UAB, definitely a winnable game. And Rice, a definitely winnable game. So, I mean, I predict that, USF is going to finish the season just with 2 losses, one to Miami, which is considered probably a very good loss for USF, and one to Memphis, which is a little bit questionable in terms of, the quality of loss that they face. But I expect them to be in the American Championship game this year. If we kind of look across the board, very high scoring offense that USF has. There's not many huge takeaways. I'm looking at that over under at 64.5, especially for this Navy matchup, thinking I think they're going to blow the doors off it. And I think that USF could probably get pretty close at, scoring 64 points themselves. If we look at their, last 5 to 6 games, scoring in, 63, 54, 63, 48, 55 in their last 5 wins. So that's kind of how I'm seeing this matchup happening. But yeah, I mean, do you want to take a look at Byron Brown? Do you want to take a look at anything else?
Yeah. Take a look at that, and I'll keep talking kind of about the American. I do, like you said, I agree with you. They're going to be, or I won't say they will, because I think USF is going to win this game.
Yeah.
But the winner of this game, just looking at both of their schedules, each of Navy and USF only having or I guess USF only has 1 loss in conference, but really the winner of this game is going to probably be one of the 2 teams in the American Championship game. So the other one looks like it's probably going to be North Texas with the 1 USF loss. But I was kind of wanted to talk about Byron Brown because we've talked about him a little bit, but he's phenomenal. I mean, he's been phenomenal all year. Yeah.
I mean, just taking a look at his headline grades, which is kind of how we evaluate all the different positional players on what I consider their best 7 to 8 attributes that describe who they are. Look, he's, I wouldn't necessarily call him a huge dual threat quarterback, but you rarely see quarterbacks with both A grades in passing and rushing. And overall being an A+ in total offense, which is kind of attributed to his passing and rushing ability. He's very efficient on the deep ball and the medium pass. When he's blitzed or pressured, he's around average, a little bit above average. But I mean, overall, if we look at his QBR throughout the season, a little bit of volatility there. But overall, a really excellent quarterback, a highly accurate quarterback as well. So he's not doing a lot of, turnover-worthy style plays. When he throws an interception, but it's not necessarily kind of attributed to, he's always throwing, these heaves up, especially in kind of the deep ball, where you see a lot of these picks happen for some of these top quarterbacks. So I think he's a very complete quarterback. I think he'll, have no trouble against the Navy defense. And I think he'll kind of continue what he's been able to do the last few weeks, protecting the ball, throwing a couple touchdown passes, maybe getting a couple on the ground as well.
Yeah. And kind of just to your point, looking at QBR and the games that he's put up so far this year, really anytime his QBR is below 80 is when they lose the game. And it's interesting, Miami obviously has a good squad. They've faltered as of late, but a very good team. Memphis, a good team in the American, who, as of last week, still looked like they had a fighting chance to get into the playoff. I don't know about anymore. But yeah, no, very, I guess the key to the game, if you're Navy, is kind of, control the game clock by running the ball and having sustained drives, and then find a way to stop Byron Brown. Just looking at his overall stats, his headline grades, all of that. I don't know how I would stop him, but I'm sure if you're looking at that Miami or Memphis game tape, you're seeing what they're doing, which to me, it looked like they always had a spy on him. They were blitzing and disguising coverages a lot. So if I'm Navy, that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I couldn't agree anymore. And I think that we've kind of talked high level about what we think about this game, what we think about Byron Brown. I mean, I think that USF wins this game. Right now, the AI prediction is 78% that USF wins this game. I think that's kind of spot on. It kind of matches what we're looking at the spread, which is 10.5. So I don't have any huge high-level takeaways. I think the best bet here, from my perspective, would, one, take the over because you're facing a Navy defense that's pretty poor, gives up a lot of points this year, but they also are capable of scoring themselves. So I think that taking the over here makes the most sense. And if you have any secondary bets, I think I would take USF to cover. They've been pretty good at covering this year in terms of being able to put points up and beat their opponents handily. So I think I would take USF spread and then over on the game, and that kind of aligns with what the AI is predicting as well.
Yes, no, I agree. I think those are kind of where I would be leaning as well. I think the kind of, you said it earlier, but USF might put up 64 on their own.
Yeah.
Like they've done that throughout the season in some games. So again, this is our in-season college football show for week 12. For any USF, any Navy fans, any college football fans in general, please remember to follow, like, subscribe, and check out inseason.co. All right, I want to move on. Our next game that we have highlighted, College Game Day, Notre Dame versus Pitt. Currently, Pitt is an 11.5 point underdog, and the over-under is 55.5. Want to hear kind of your thoughts and go into that. Or I guess first, let's pull up, what is in-season AI saying kind of from the get-go?
Yeah, from the get go, it's 78% chance that Notre Dame wins. That's pretty in par with also what we're seeing with the Vegas money line at Pitt plus 11.5. So I think that from that perspective, I think this is a more than not very winnable game for Notre Dame, and probably a winnable game from the terms of like covering the spread as well. If we take a look more in depth at these teams, I mean, look, I Notre Dame is 7-2, and you can say, hey, they've had two losses very early on in the season, and have won. I think what is it, the last seven? I think they were 0-2, now 7-2. They have a very good defense and a very good offense. I think that they were kind of undercounted from being in contention on the playoffs versus what we saw at the very beginning of the season. But they're facing a Pitt team that's also 7-2 with very different metrics. If we look at SP Plus offensive ranking, Notre Dame's 6th. Pitt's 27th in defensive ranking, Notre Dame's 12th, Pitt's 33rd. So you're kind of looking at two different teams, two different levels of teams with the same record. If we want to look more specifically at Notre Dame's offense versus Pitt's defense, Notre Dame rushes the ball with high efficiency, averaging about 195 rushing yards per game. Also throws the ball fairly well at 271 passing yards per game, led by CJ Carr. So I think this is going to be kind of what we've seen Notre Dame do the last 7 games, set up the pass to run the ball to set up the pass, kind of being able to switch between those two different types of play styles. I think with high efficiency, I'm not seeing any huge high-level takeaways that are saying, hey, Pitt might be a sneaky underdog here. If we look at Pitt's offense versus Notre Dame's defense, it's kind of a similar story. Pitt's been able to produce a lot of good efficiency in terms of the passing game and the rushing game, but it's not anything that Notre Dame hasn't seen this year. And Notre Dame has a pretty good ability to actually limit the high level metrics that we're seeing from their opponents. So I think that from that perspective, I don't think that there's any chance of really a Pitt win here. And I don't know if I have too much of a view on the actual spread of the game, but I think that Notre Dame has a pretty handleable case in winning this game.
Yeah, no, the only other thing I kind of highlighted, and I think you're all correct on that. Notre Dame's come up a lot. I know Texas Tech fans, I really don't know why. I could never find the start of it, but Texas Tech fans and Notre Dame fans kind of got into it lately. I think it had something to do with Coach Jerry Maguire's comments at a press conference.
Yeah.
But Notre Dame and Texas Tech have both kind of come up a lot in the AQR rankings. Wanted to kind of point out Notre Dame because of their independent schedule. They've had, I guess, 3 what we would call Q1 games so far.
Mm-hmm.
Miami, Texas A&M. So started off with a really tough 1-2 kind of punch, and then USC. In those games, they lost by 3, they lost by 1, and then they beat USC by 10. The reason they're kind of at number 13 right now in the AQR is because they just kill you with Q2 and Q3 wins.
Yeah.
Even though they have those 2 losses, they're to quad 1 teams, so the AQR doesn't harshly penalize those losses over like a Q3 or Q4 loss. But man, they have Q2, Q3 wins. Of those 7 games they played, they have kind of 1 Q1 win, or 7 wins on their 7-game winning streak. 1 Q1 win, 3 Q2 wins, and 3 Q3 wins. So they kind of have that. The last thing I wanted to point out, kind of any of the Heisman hopefuls that we have whenever we're previewing a game, I want to talk about Jeremiyah Love. this Notre Dame offense, they, SP plus 4 or 6, whatever they are, offense. But man, they go with Jeremiah Love. If he has a good game, really, if they're giving him the ball, because you look at that Miami game, only 10 attempts rushing, Texas A&M game, 23 attempts, 94 yards. But when he's on and when he's playing well, when they're giving him the ball a lot, man, they're tough to beat because he is phenomenal.
Yeah, and look, he's improved over the season as well. I have him as our number one overall rushing running back. That's considering both receiving and rushing, but I have him number one in overall rushing and offense. He's a great running back. He's has now teetering over the last 3 games around 8.1 yards per carry. Pair of touchdowns in the last 2 games against Navy and Boston College, 1 touchdown against USC. Look, he's one of the best running backs in the country this year, and I think has really kind of been on a really good trajectory after those first 2 losses against Miami and A&M. So yeah, I agree. He's definitely in the Heisman talks just because of what his performance has been throughout the season, and I think that Notre Dame doesn't necessarily have a hard schedule in terms of the last 3 games against Pitt, Syracuse, and Stanford. I kind of continue seeing him getting over that 100-yard mark in both of those 3 matchups, or in each of those 3 matchups per se. So super excited to see kind of what he's able to do there. But yeah, overall, really great running back. I don't think that he'll have any trouble against the Pitt defense. Let me just actually quickly take a look at what we're saying with the Pitt defense. They do actually have one of the better run defenses, but kind of at the highest level, I don't think that's going to be too much of an issue.
Yeah, I mean, he's seen his whole career, really. He's seen good rushing defenses that he is still able to put up yards on. So I don't know if that's necessarily going to stop him.
Mm-mm.
What will be interesting is if early on Pitt is able to stop the run, if
Yeah,
Notre Dame starts to lean on CJ Carr and kind of
yeah,
abandon the run, because that's what we saw in the Miami game. We saw that a little bit in Texas A&M. They kind of started off. You could tell their kind of first 15 scripted plays,
yeah,
they were, let's establish the run. And that didn't really work. So they went away from that. And obviously then it became a kind of a 41-40 kind of a old time Big 12 matchup. So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. Any kind of last minute things that you wanted to talk about for Notre Dame versus Pitt?
No, yeah. I mean, I think we've kind of covered most of what we wanted to talk about. I think that kind of what you said at the end, if they take away the run game early on, having CJ Carr as his momentum over the last couple games has been pretty spectacular. I think he's an excellent quarterback. He ranks as one of our top 10 percentile quarterbacks in the country this year. So I just don't think Notre Dame's going to have any issue against Pitt.
Yeah, and to your point, I don't think they'll have much issue against
No.
Syracuse or Stanford either. It seems to me with where the committee has them right now, and all the other games, the teams that are ahead of them, the games they still have to play.
Yeah.
Notre Dame's pretty much in
Yeah.
unless they falter here in one of these games.
Yep.
And this would be the most likely of those last 3.
Yep. I agree.
So anyway, Notre Dame fans, Pitt fans, any college football fans, follow, like, subscribe, check us out on X and Instagram, comment, even if you want to send some hate our way, that's fine. We can take it. But check us out. It's INSZN.co or INSZNCFB.com to find out all of the AI derived insights that in-season AI powers, as well as the advanced college football analytics. Next game I want to talk about, Iowa at USC. Iowa is obviously coming off a big, cold, wet game in Iowa against Oregon that they kind of pulled out at the last second, that Oregon pulled out in the last second. The spread right now is -7 USC. So USC is favored at home, and then it's 49.5 over under. So let's kind of talk. Yeah, let's start. I like this. Let's just start at the beginning. In season AI, what is it telling you?
Yeah, so what in-season AI is saying is USC has a 75% chance of winning this game. And with the spread being at USC by 7, what that's kind of telling me is I think USC might might win by more than 7 is kind of how I'm looking at this from the highest level. Look, I mean, you can take the last week's game, Iowa versus Oregon, weird weather, weird conditions, limiting Oregon's offense based on that, and that kind of attributes more to Iowa being able to kind of rely on their defense, which they've obviously done the last decade, if I can remember. So I think this is going to be a little bit more of a standard Iowa versus USC matchup in terms of USC's high-powered offense, Iowa's high-powered defense. So I think that, USC is going to be pretty efficient against Iowa. Let's look at quickly kind of the high-level metrics of this matchup. USC actually ranks number 1 in SP plus offense versus Iowa's 52 in SP plus offense. But on the converse, Iowa's defense is 5th in SP plus and USC's 42nd. So again, this is kind of your typical Iowa game where it's going to be an offense versus defensive matchup. I think quickly, since USC is our number 1 SP plus offensive ranking, let's look at what they've been able to produce versus what Iowa typically allows. And the thing that kind of stands the highest here is USC is getting about 200 rushing yards on the ground per game, where Iowa allows 100. And then in terms of passing yards, USC produces around 303 passing yards per game, where Iowa allows 150. So what we're looking at here is Iowa is, over the opponents they face this year, which is a pretty tough Big Ten this year. They've limited to about 50% of what USC's been able to produce this year. So I'm kind of interested to see how Iowa's defense is able to impact the offense of USC. I don't necessarily think that they're going to limit them to 50% of what they've typically done on a given season. But that's kind of my high-level takeaways here. Do you have anything you want to point out in addition to that?
Yeah, I mean, first we kind of briefly talked about it, but that Oregon squad that they just faced, was number 12 SP plus.
Yeah.
So Iowa limited them to 18 points per game, or 18 points in that game. And that is a very high-powered offense as well. The other, kind of just looking through the playmakers that USC has, Jaden Mayava, their quarterback, has been phenomenal. Looking at his headline grades, I don't know really how you attack him. I mean, you get pressure on the quarterback. It seems like is the kind of as a C there. That seems like, but to be fair, that seems like in anyone, if they can get pressure on a quarterback, there aren't many quarterbacks that handle that pressure really well and stay in the pocket.
Yeah.
But the games that they have lost and the games that Jaden has not played his best, he was getting pressured a lot, and you could kind of see towards the end of those games, after getting hit over and over and over again, he didn't want to stay in the pocket, didn't want to follow through and finish his throws. So yeah, I think this probably is going to be a game similar to that Oregon-Iowa game last week. Hopefully in Southern California, the weather's better than it was, but it seems like this is going to be a kind of a tough game for both Iowa and for USC. I know both of them are still ranked in the AP poll. USC is still ranked in the AQR. But yeah, I don't know if I was going to pick USC -7 or Iowa +7. I don't know if personally I would pick one of those. I would probably lean on the under, just because Iowa has shown time and time again, kind of like you said, for the last 10 years, pretty much the last 20 years, ever since Kirk Ferentz got there, and I'm sure before that as well, they have been able to rely on that defense, and they play close games because that defense keeps them in it. So
Yeah.
if I had to pick, I would kind of lean towards the under on this game.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think the under on this game makes a lot of sense. And then if I'm thinking the under, then I'm probably thinking that Iowa could cover 7 points. I think USC wins this game. I think that's my highest level takeaway here. But that's kind of how I'm thinking about it as well. Because if you think about, 50 points, 25 each, and then take 7 on that, it looks like a 17-24 type matchup is kind of how I'm viewing that as well. So that's kind of my thoughts there as well. But yeah, anything else you want to touch on? I mean, look, I just pulled up Iowa quickly to look at their headline grades. Just phenomenal on pass rush defense, on coverage defense, top 25 percentile on run defense. So if anything, it will force USC to run the ball a little bit more than they have throughout the season. Reminds me a little bit of that USC-Nebraska game where Jaden just didn't have a great game, but they were able to kind of switch to the run game and still pull out the win. That's kind of how I'm looking at this game probably going. And in that case, it's a lower scoring affair, and I think the under makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I agree with you there. So anyway, that is our preview for Iowa at USC. This is the in-season college football show for week 12. All USC fans, Iowa fans, Big Ten fans, still weird to say USC and Big Ten, but Big Ten fans and anyone else, just college football fans in general, please follow, like, subscribe, comment, tell us the content you want to see, ask questions. We're always awake and always happy to help and answer any questions you have. And please check out INSZN.co or INSeasoncfb.com. Next game, I want to look at Oklahoma at Alabama. This is a game that's Alabama is favored by 6 points. Over under is 45.5. This is a game that's probably going to, if Alabama wins, knock Oklahoma out of the SEC championship conversation and potentially out of the college football playoff conversation. With 3 losses, I don't know what the committee would be thinking there. And Alabama's still at 8-1. They have that Florida State loss that is still kind of hurting them in the AQR, but they're number 4 in the nation on the CFP rankings, in the AP poll, coaches poll, all of that, and they have yet to lose in the SEC. So they're kind of in the driver's seat for that championship game. So let's kind of go ahead and talk about that. First off, what is in-season AI kind of telling us?
Yeah, in-season AI has Alabama at a 69% chance of winning this game. And when you kind of juxtapose that with Alabama by 6, basically what the AI is telling us here is bet Alabama to beat the spread. At a high level, we think that Alabama's not going to have much of an issue against Oklahoma. And they are on their, X game win streak after their first loss of the season, or the first game loss of the season at FSU. This is a totally different team than what we saw in the first 2 to 3 games this year. And then Oklahoma, I think, on the converse, has surprised a lot of people with how effective they've been. But again, faltering in games that they should have won. I think they should have beat Texas in that game, but they faced a pretty good defense that Texas had, and it really limited their ability to produce anything with Mateer leading that charge. But yeah, if we look at it kind of from the metric level, Alabama is a solid team, 20th in SP Plus offensive ranking, 10th in defensive ranking. On the converse, OU's 29th in offensive ranking and 3rd in defense SP Plus ranking. So I think it's not necessarily one of those offense versus defense matchups that we've been seeing a lot of this year. It's more of a 2 solid teams with both 2 solid defenses. So I think that's going to be interesting to see, how Ty Simpson and Mateer can operate in these 2 different schemas against these defenses, because these are both passing-led offenses. I think there's no question about that. What do you want to look at in particular here that would help refine this view?
Yeah. I mean, I know we kind of talked briefly last week about the Alabama and LSU game, kind of looked at, Ty Simpson and just his play over the past 9 games. So the whole season so far.
Yeah.
And, kind of, I was just looking at that LSU game in kind of a recap. He had a good game. The one thing that I think the headline grades showcase in watching that game, and it kind of your eye test, then after watching it, you're like, yeah, that checks out. He does not perform as well as he normally does when he's pressured.
Yep.
And that's true with a lot of quarterbacks. That's not necessarily a knock on Ty, but it definitely
it was the worst attribute. I mean, if you look at all the different, if we look at all of his headline grades, he's pretty much top 10, 15, 25 percentile in most of the metrics, with pressure pass being in the 37th percentile. That's his worst metric by far. He even does better when he's blitzed and not the pocket just collapsing around him. So I think that's kind of one of the things that I look at with Ty Simpson and saying, hey, what does OU need to do against Alabama in order to limit Ty Simpson's efficiencies? And if we go take a look at kind of what OU's specialty is on their defense, Pass rush defense is B plus, so it's a top 20 percentile pass rush defense in the country this year. So I think if they kind of lean on that, I think what that's going to allow is, a little bit of a deviation from what Ty Simpson does in terms of that medium to deep pass, kind of making him keep it a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage, having to get yards in smaller chunks as opposed to those big deep balls that he typically gets, those 20-yard chunk plays. So that's kind of one of the main things I'm looking at here in terms of what OU can do against Alabama to limit Ty Simpson. But yeah, happy to take a look at anything else as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's kind of what I had highlighted and circled was just that LSU game. Obviously, Alabama won at 20-9.
Yeah.
It was one of those games that felt like it was more just because LSU could not do anything on offense.
Yeah.
But yeah, that kind of was showcased a little bit. That headline grade of a D plus in pressure pass was showcased a little bit when I was watching that game, because when the front four of LSU was able to get in his face, Ty was not the same quarterback. So if I'm Brent Venables and I'm coaching up the defense for this week and coming up with a defensive game plan, that's what I'm looking to do is have some stunts, get them in pass situations, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, 3rd and long, when Ty is going to have to drop back and pass, and then get in his face, because when he hasn't made a whole lot of mistakes this year, 1 interception, but when he is off target, it's because there's someone in his face.
Yeah.
And that, again, for all the Alabama fans, I don't want y'all to think I'm knocking him, because he's been phenomenal all year. He's led y'all to 8 straight wins, 9 straight wins. So he's been phenomenal all year, but that is kind of the one thing. And like you said, it's showcased in the headline grades. So I guess kind of final thoughts on Alabama, Oklahoma, anything like that?
Yeah, I think the one thing I'm looking at is the over under at 45.5 and Alabama by 6. And, our AI is predicting Alabama has a 69% chance of winning this game. I don't necessarily know what direction I would go in terms of the over under. I think Alabama is going to cover by 6. I think that I'm pretty confident about that bet, but the over under, Alabama hasn't put up a ton of points this year, and OU is pretty good at limiting the amount of points their opponent's able to get. So that's kind of the one question mark I have. So if anything, I would definitely bet Alabama by 6, or if you feel less sure about that type of bet, definitely bet Alabama money line.
Yeah, no, yeah, and I kind of wanted to let you talk just briefly about the 69% chance confidence that AI is giving Alabama in this game. You had earlier said that a 67% chance or 67% confidence that AI gives it normally is like a 10-point spread.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, I agree with that. Normally anything kind of 67 to 71% falls in the spread range of about 10.5 to 12.5. So what this is saying is that we think this is a high value bet for Alabama by 6. So that's kind of how I would take away from reading that metric.
Got you. And the other thing I wanted to point out is it hasn't been showcased here, I guess, because all of the games are kind of, at least so far, they've all been 6, 7, 10-point spreads. Some a little closer at 3, but the AI doesn't just go with what Vegas is saying.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the UCF game last week was the perfect kind of one that immediately comes to mind, where Houston was favored. Or not UCF, not Houston. Was it the Houston UCF game?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but basically, kind of to summarize how this works is, without getting too technical, there's about 120 features I look at that encompass both offensive metrics and defensive metrics for both teams. And what I do is I run a machine learning model that is able to weight those different metrics against how they've done throughout the season against different opponents. And what I'm able to do now is produce any type of hypothetical matchup from this offense versus defense and vice versa. And so what this does is actually completely independent of the spread. A lot of times you might see it align pretty closely with
kind
spread.
of some correlation, right?
Exactly. But when we see this deviation like we're seeing here, is kind of what we consider a high value bet. Now, the AI is wrong. Our model's wrong sometimes, and that's just human nature of sports gambling, sports betting. But kind of the takeaway I have here is, look, we're right about 74-75% of the time in terms of outcomes, which is one of the best, if not the best, models around the league this year. So I'm pretty confident in our ability to predict the outcome of this game.
Yeah, and that 74-75% is available. Kind of all of those confidence metrics are available to in-season insiders right now.
Yeah.
And there's a whole lot of other features coming. So please follow, like, subscribe, check out INSZN.co or INSZNCFB.com. Comment, let us know the other games you want to hear from, kind of preview anything else that you want to talk about or want us to talk about. And we will see you next time. Want to move on to our next game, Utah at Baylor. This is a game that I kind of highlighted because Utah is very much in the hunt. Not only are they one of the kind of clearly one of the top 3 teams in the Big 12, there seems like there's a big gap between 3 and 4, or 3 and everyone else, really. But yeah, Utah's clearly in the hunt, and they may not make it to the Big 12 championship game because they happen to play Tech and BYU this year, the other 2 best teams in the Big 12. But this is a game that if you're a Baylor Bears fan, you want to see them win this game, obviously, but you want to see them become bowl eligible, and you want to see kind of that, if that UCF game at homecoming 2 weeks ago was kind of an outlier, or was that really the team that we should have been seeing all year? So kind of want to get into it. What is AI saying kind of initially?
Yeah, AI is saying that Utah has a 73% chance of winning this game. The current line is Utah by 8.5, Baylor, giving Baylor 8.5 points. Kind of what I see from this line is that typically when we see something in the 73 percentile range, the spread is typically a little bit higher. If I were to think about kind of all the games we've looked at this year through the prior weeks, 73% chance of winning is typically associated with a spread around 12.5, 13.5, almost a 2-touchdown game. So what this is telling me here is that we think Utah is going to win this game, and we think Utah is going to win this game by more than 8.5 points. So if I were just betting purely on this game from what our models said and been trained on all year, I would take Utah here. But kind of getting a little bit more into the nitty gritty of the metrics themselves. Look, this is a very complete Utah team versus what I would consider an incomplete Baylor team. Utah ranks 19th in SP plus offense and 8th in defense, whereas Baylor's 22nd in offense and 93rd in defense. That's kind of been the telling story of Baylor this year. Baylor knew they had a lot of talent coming into this year, and it's really underperformed expectations overall. Their offense has been good and bad, but their defense has been pretty poor, except for the last game that they had against UCF before the bye week that they had last weekend. So, it's kind of the thing is, did Baylor turn it around, or is it just showcasing a defense against a pretty poor UCF team is kind of the outstanding question here. We know that Baylor can put up a lot of points when their defenses they face are, a little bit more middle of the line, but this is a great defense that Utah has this year, one of the better defenses in the country. And so I think that's going to be kind of a telling sign of, what is Baylor able to actually put up against Utah? And I think Utah will have no problem putting up points against Baylor.
Yeah, I agree. Kind of the one thing I highlighted, really the only weakness in Utah, at least from a defensive perspective, has been their run defense and their ability to stop the run. Headline grade right now is a D plus.
Yeah.
Run defense. So, and that kind of was highlighted in the BYU game and really the Tech game. Teams that are able to run on them, that are able to sustain drives and kind of, first, second, third down, just hand the ball off to their backs and get a first down. Those are the teams that have been able to show some strength against against Utah's defense. The other thing that I kind of wanted to point out is Baylor has kind of been up and down in running and rushing this year. Games that they've played really well, have been, because they were establishing the run early, and they were able to have, either Caden Knighton or Bryson Washington have 100 rush yard games. So
Yeah.
if I'm Baylor, that's what I'm going to do. If I'm Coach Jake Spavital, the offensive coordinator, I'm going to try to establish the run early,
Yeah.
so then we can establish the pass, which really has been where the offense has shined. Now, a lot of that goes back to Baylor's defense has not been great this year, and as a result, they've had to throw the ball a lot more and kind of abandon the run earlier because they're trying to catch up in the game, or stay in the game. But kind of that Auburn game, first game of the year, showcased uh, that exactly. They had to kind of give up on running the ball because Auburn was scoring, kind of at will and controlling the game clock. So,
Yeah.
um,
I think one of the things I would talk about Baylor's defense here is I think it was exactly showcased in their very first game of the year against Auburn, and has been kind of the story over time, is that their coverage defense has been higher than what we expected this year. Typically, Baylor's D backs is kind of one of the weaker points of Baylor's defensive scheme. This year, they've been pretty exceptional in terms of what they've been able to
yeah,
accomplish.
I mean,
Being
I
the
think I think
top.
that was kind of the right. That was the big question coming in, as both of us being kind of, from Baylor families, or having gone to Baylor Law and Baylor fans. Um, the secondary was kind of the big question because that was the problem last year. It's kind of funny that the secondary has not been the problem this year. They've been great, and
It's
everything
been
else.
kind of
Yeah,
bad. One of the things I just think about for Baylor's defense this year is broken plays, and you can kind of see it in the pass rush defense. They're actually decently good at rushing the quarterback, but they never get him down. So the quarterback's able to scramble and get yards on the ground, which also attributes to kind of the run defense that they've been putting up this year. So if Utah isn't able to get anything going on their passing game, I think switching to a running game against Baylor's defense isn't the worst option set up, and that kind of brings all the coverage in, and then they're able to kind of go set up the run to set up the pass, and kind of take some of those deep shots that they've been able to accomplish this year. So kind of from that perspective, I don't think that Baylor's defense is going to be able to hold up much against Utah's offense. I think that, unless we look at if we take the UCF game away, their offense or their defense has been pretty lackluster this year. But at the same time, Baylor is capable of putting up points. Utah's capable of putting up points. So I think that if I'm looking at this from a actual betting perspective, I think that given what our AI is predicting in terms of the outcome of the game, I think I would take Utah winning by more than 8.5 points. But I also might take a look at that over as well, just given the power of both offenses.
yeah, I agree, and I think kind of two things that I'm looking for in terms of Baylor defense and Baylor defensively is, one, this is something that I know on Sikkim 365. You and I, your dad and I, we've all talked about. In that Auburn game, it seemed like Jackson Arnold could, run at will. Obviously, we got some pressure on him, but then he would scramble and run for 20 or 25 or 30 yards. Um, and it seemed like we never had anyone playing quarterback spy. And
Mm-hmm.
so kind of we never put someone as a spy on the quarterback. So with Devin Dampier, who is a legitimate two-way or two type quarterback, he can run and pass. I'm looking to see if we have anyone that we can put as a spy on him to
Mm-hmm.
prevent those kind of broken plays. Um, and then I'm also looking to see if UCF was an outlier, or if that is kind of the team that should have shown up all year for Baylor defensively, at least, and hadn't until homecoming weekend.
Yeah, I agree with that. And yeah, and Devin Dampier being a B quarterback in both passing and rushing, I think attributes to us needing to be able to stop his scrambling and running game as well. And I think that's kind of a third layer of attributes that doesn't necessarily match up well against Baylor's defense.
Yeah. So, any Baylor fans, if you're here from Sikkim or anything like that, hello. We will see you at the game, and please follow, like, subscribe, comment. Check out INSZN.co. Utah fans, please do the same. We will be there if you see us, if you recognize us. I know the sun's coming in, so if you recognize these faces, please come in, say hi, tell us you like the videos, tell us what other content you want to see ask any questions, but check out inseason.co or inseasoncfb.com. All right. I want to move on. Next game I have, kind of one of the big games, Texas at Georgia. Texas right now is 6-point underdogs, and the over-under is 48.5. I know we've talked a lot about Texas, whether it's kind of here previewing some of their games or over with Steven on QB Spotlight. So if anyone's over there or coming from over there, just comment and let us know that you found us on QB Spotlight. That's been great to talk just quarterbacks with Steven, and we enjoy that and look forward to that each week. But I kind of want to get into it. Christian, what is in-season AI telling you about this game?
Yeah, so what this is basically saying, which I find a little bit strange, to be honest, that it predicted it this heavily, but it has Georgia at 84% chance of winning this game. But the spread right now is Georgia by 6. So what this is saying, and it's not always accurate, it's accurate 75% of the time, but what this is saying is Georgia might blow the doors off Texas. And I think that's going to a little bit of a shock to me because I think Texas's defense is pretty solid across the board. But I think Georgia's offense has really shown their prowess this year, and their defense is also fairly strong, and I think that's going to limit Texas's offensive ability. So that's what we're seeing from the AI perspective. But, yeah, let's go ahead and jump into the scouting report. And so what we're looking at here is, Texas's offense was kind of one of the hallmarks of the preseason talk this year. What was Arch Manning going to be able to do? What was their running game going to be able to do kind of overall? How are they going to be able to form offensively after, Quinn Ewers left? And this year they've been a little bit more lackluster than we expected, but I think that can be attributed to a younger offense than they had last year. But right now they're 42nd in SP plus offense, but 7th in SP plus defense, whereas Georgia is a little bit more solid across the board at 14th in offensive ranking and 12th in defensive ranking. So that's kind of how I'm looking at this game from more of the high level metric perspective. I think this is going to be, if Texas's defense is able to hold strongly as they have kind of in many games this year, and their offense can put something together, I think it's going to be a little bit of a closer matchup. But if their offense falters as they have against top defenses this year, I'm a little bit questionable on how Texas is going to actually be able to pull something like this out at Georgia.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is going to be. I was the same way in terms of what in-season AI was telling us in terms of its confidence that Georgia was going to win. Was surprising to me. Not one because we're in Austin and you kind of feel the city and everyone's excited about Texas football. But two, because it seems like as of late, Texas may have turned a corner. Kind of offensively, they've figured out what they needed to on the offensive line. Arch has played better. He's protected the ball more, really. And this is kind of our player diagnosis on Arch, if you go check that out. But kind of one of the keys of that was he's getting the ball out quicker. So Sark is giving him chances to, have a lot of wide receiver screens, get the ball out quick in less than 2 seconds or right at 2.5, kind of that golden mark we're looking for. And so he's making quick decisions, and it seems like Arch has more confidence. So that was surprising to me. Kind of at the same thing, man, Georgia just continues to reload. They may not be kind of as headline good as they have been in the past, but they just roll through teams. This is a game with both Georgia and Texas only having one loss in the SEC might knock one of the teams, the losing team, out of kind of the SEC championship game contention. I don't know if this knocks out Georgia if they lose this game from the college football playoff, but it may knock Texas out just with really the OU game being the only big Q1 win they have so far. So I think that was the biggest surprise to me, was as we were preparing for this, was that in-season AI was saying, man, bet Georgia's going to run away with this. Not that 75% accuracy, which is phenomenal, but like not that we're always right, or in-season AI is always right, but that what the AI is telling us is that Georgia should win this game by more than 10 points.
Yeah. So that's what I'm seeing there. I'm trying to see any other takeaways from the data that might give us a little better indication of that. And look, the AI also considers momentum as well, so it's not necessarily just saying, hey, we're comparing the Texas of the first couple weeks to the Texas of now. So it really is considering the last 3 games as kind of one of the stronger indications of momentum. So I'm interested to kind of break down the data a little bit more when I get a chance to look at it, to see kind of why is it predicting Georgia having such a strong winning percentage against a pretty solid Texas defense. So that's kind of what I'm interested to see, and interested to see, as we go and watch the game this weekend.
Yeah. I think really Texas's strength all year has been their defense. Even when the offense hasn't played as well, the defense has just kept them in those games. Kind of that Mississippi State game was the
Yeah,
perfect one that I think of, where offensively they just weren't doing anything. Had a big kind of return from special teams to kind of bring them back into games and things like that. But man, the defense has kept them in games. Offensively, Georgia just does everything really well.
yeah,
They pass well. Gunnar Stockton kind of leads them well. They run well. So if they kind of get up and get up early, it may be tough to kind of come back for Texas unless they can really get in a groove and kind of have some of that momentum. So um, that's our kind of preview for Texas at Georgia. For any Texas fans, any Georgia fans, SEC fans, college football fans, please follow, like, subscribe, comment, check us out on X and Instagram and even TikTok. And then please go to INSZN.co or INSZNCFB.com. All right, we're coming into what I have as our last game that we're going to talk about. Another game, kind of all the games that we were looking at had kind of CFP, college football playoff implications. This is TCU at BYU, so going up to Provo to play the Cougars. The spread on this right now is BYU minus 4.5. Over under is 51.5. TCU obviously coming off a loss that was surprising, to say the least. Didn't foresee them losing that game last week, and BYU kind of trying to bounce back after that Texas Tech game. So let's just get right into it. What is in-season AI telling you?
yeah. In-season AI is saying that BYU has a 61% chance of winning this game. Typically, that's kind of equates to a spread of around a touchdown, so we're a little bit more in line versus some of the other games we have previewed this week. But look, it has BYU winning at about a 61% chance, and so that's kind of, I think the AI is fairly in line with what the Vegas line is for right now. This is a very good BYU team. Obviously had a loss against Texas Tech last week, but has handled their opponents throughout the season fairly well. This is a TCU team that's been okay. They're 6-3. They're pretty average in terms of offense and defense. 34th in SP plus offense and 47th in defense, whereas BYU's 39th in offense and 19th in defense. So there's no huge high level takeaways I'm seeing here that provides indication one way or the other, and saying that TCU is going to be able to pull off the upset, especially it being in Provo. I think even lends to BYU a little bit more here. But if we look at kind of the high level metrics, TCU's offense has been pretty solid, but BYU has been pretty effective at shutting down their opponents this year, especially in the passing game. TCU is averaging about 303 passing yards per game. BYU gives about 192. And then on the run game, TCU is getting about 123 rushing yards per game. BYU's allows around 131. So BYU's rushing defense isn't great, but their coverage defense is pretty solid, and I think will limit what Hoover's able to do. So they're gonna maybe have to think about switching up their game plan a little bit in terms of maybe having to set up the run a little bit more in terms of opening up their passing game.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and that's kind of what last thing I kind of wanted to get into about this game, or what I really wanted to get into is, both these teams lost last week, kind of showed neither of them was very good offensively in their games. Kind of, I watched both of them. TCU kind of, had a shot at the end, but really was not their typical offensive,
Yeah,
high-powered offense self. And BYU the same way, just Tech really stopped them offensively. And I know that game was 26-9, but it could
yeah,
have been 40-9, 40 to 50-9. It was Tech just had control over that game. So if you're the offensive coordinator for TCU or BYU, what are you trying to do to, just based on headline grades and all of that? I kind of have BYU pulled up, their coverage defense B plus, pass rush defense C, run defense D plus. So if I'm BYU, I'm trying to get Bear and LJ Martin and all of our rushing threats started early and kind of in a groove early. But I wanted to kind of hear your thoughts, just looking at some of the headline grades and all of that.
Yeah, if I'm looking at the headline grades, especially we'll start with BYU first, then go to TCU. So if I'm TCU and I'm looking at the headline grades and saying, hey, coverage is B plus, that kind of limits Hoover's ability a little bit passing the ball. Pass rush defense is a C, so not a huge threat in terms of getting pressure at the quarterback, but definitely still able to do that. But the run defense is being D plus, 37th percentile, which is not great. TCU is able to put the ball on the ground and run effectively. I think that's going to be their main, ability to actually pull the coverage in, set up the run game to ultimately set up the passing game. So if I'm TCU in that perspective, that's how I'm thinking about this game. And now from BYU's perspective, let's look at TCU's headline grades.
Yeah, and this is kind of where I wanted this conversation to go, because this surprised me as I was looking. A plus run defense from TCU. Yeah, so really, talk about that.
Yeah, so what this is basically saying is TCU is, probably one of the top 2 to 3 run defenses in the country this year. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they limit the rushing yards of their opponents as much, but they're able to effectively stop the run. They're able to, look at the schema and effectively, change their defensive coordination, defensive play style in terms of protecting, a lot of efficient yards on the ground. So that's kind of one of the biggest surprises that I have of TCU this year is even though they're 6-3. They have one of the best rush defenses in the country this year. And they also have a pretty solid coverage defense as well. B minus, it's around the 40th percentile this year. So, if I'm BYU and I'm thinking, hey, we're going to have to rely on Bear a lot to get a lot of the yards through the air, what does that actually mean in terms of their offensive schema or their offensive play style, play calling that they're going to run this year? Because BYU's been pretty effective in having the run game, setting up the pass game this year, but kind of flipping the script a little bit and saying, hey, we might have to be a pass-first offense in order to get, those chunk yards, chunk plays in order to put up anything against TCU. That's kind of the one main thing I'm looking at.
Yeah, and kind of, I'm glad this conversation happened because that's where I wanted it to go. Kind of the if I'm just in my mind's eye thinking of TCU offensively, they're kind of a better pass team. And Josh Hoover, is a phenomenal quarterback. Josh Hoover is a phenomenal quarterback, and they kind of want him to lead the offense. Kind of on the dichotomy between TCU and BYU is Bear is a good quarterback. He's very young, and they want him and the run game to kind of set up, like you said, the pass and everything else.
Yeah.
TCU's defense is best against the run. BYU's defense is best against the pass. So that's why this kind of spread at 51.5. I could see this game going under. I mean, both defenses, kind of their bread and butter is going to be what the other offense wants to rely on. So this could be a game that ends up like 20-17 or, 24-21, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Which is also why our prediction model might have, hey, we think this is going to be a lower scoring affair than we previously thought, which is why it kind of aligns a little bit more with the spread we're seeing at 4.5. If I think the defenses, were a little bit more lackadaisical in terms of being able to stop the, offensive superiority of both teams, I think you'd obviously the over-under being higher. And also the spread being a little bit wider, but I kind of what you're saying again with the defenses having the specialties against what the offenses are being able to put up and have put up this year. I think that's why you're seeing a little bit of that compression of the spread.
Yeah, no, I agree. So no matter what, I'm excited to watch. It'll be kind of the 9:00 game that I'll have on. So I'm excited about that. Anyway, just kind of wanted to say, this was great. We always enjoy INSZN College Football Show each week. This was our Week 12 preview. Any TCU fans, any BYU Cougar fans, Big 12 fans, college football fans, please check us out on inseason.co. Follow, like, subscribe, comment with anything you want to see from us, any additional content, any questions, just anything. And please, like I said, check us out at inseason.co or inseasoncfb.com. This was our Week 12 preview. I'm Braxton Wilkes, and that's Christian Berry, kind of co-founders of In Season, and we will see you next week.